The Titans play the Patriots in preseason week 3 this weekend. We are going to preview that game and talk about the biggest questions remaining about this Titans team as we head into the final preseason game. I'm Justin Graver. With me, as always, Justin Melo. This is the Music City Audible. Justin, what's up?
I'm excited to preview this one with you. It's their last preseason game. It's the final opportunity for roster bubble players to make an impression. The Titans got a lot of big decisions to make. They've already begun making some of them. And I'm excited to talk about this game.
Yeah, so let's get to the biggest questions remaining about this team. One of the big questions before we started taping this was, who is the kicker going to be? Well, the Titans have signed Michael Badgley. They waived Trey Wolff and Caleb Shudak. They said, as we discussed on Monday's pod, these guys aren't good enough. So they have a new kicker. So we know who's going to be kicking for the Titans. So we don't need to cover that too much in depth here. He may not be the final kicker by the time everything's said and done with other roster cuts, but we'll see how he kicks in this preseason game.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the Titans were pretty smart to make this move now. If you listen to Monday's pod, I actually brought up Michael Badgley's name, right? So the Titans are looking for veteran kickers. Michael Badgley was just released by the Washington Commanders. He was actually with the Titans, I believe, in 2021 for one game. Didn't inspire much confidence. I believe he missed an extra point in that game, and then they cut him the following day. But he's back now. The reason I like this move is it gives them an opportunity to make one more decision, right? Like, they're going to watch him kick against the New England Patriots on Friday. He'll get a couple practices in with Morgan Cox and Ryan Stonehouse so they can sort of get the operation down packed. They'll evaluate how he does in practice, how he does in that game. And then from there, they can decide, okay, he's the kicker we're going to open this regular season with, or they'll look elsewhere to other roster cuts or another one of these available veterans that we discussed. So I like the timing of it. It buys them another window of opportunity to evaluate a kicker before really having to make a decision.
Yeah, so the Titans have what could be their kicker, and we'll see how he plays this weekend and practices leading up until roster cutdown day on August 29th, next Tuesday. So anyway, let's get into our biggest questions here. The biggest one for me is concerning health, and there's a bunch of guys that this pertains to, but number one is Will Levis. Is Will Levis going to play in this game on Friday night? The Titans did their blue-white scrimmage on Tuesday morning, and Will Levis did not participate. So he was on the field warming up before last preseason game on last Saturday night against the Vikings in Minnesota. He was on the field running, throwing, fully dressed out, but he did not play in that game. He was on the practice field on Tuesday morning, but he wasn't dressed out. He was just in like a workout outfit. He wasn't in pads or a helmet or anything, so he didn't participate. We don't know his status. Mike Vrabel said that they are not going to sign another QB, which would seem to indicate that he'll be okay by Friday, but that's one of the biggest things we're tracking in this game. And if he does play, how much are we going to see of him?
Well, I'd like to see a lot of Will Levis in this game if he plays. I hope he plays, right? By all accounts, the injury is not serious. Of course, it's a third preseason game, which some consider to be the most meaningless. So perhaps they'll go to the precaution route and won't play him in this game. But I'm holding out hope he plays. We haven't seen enough Will Levis. He hasn't gotten enough reps. And since, Malik Willis got to play the entire game against the Minnesota Vikings in week 2, I would like to see Will Levis start this game, receive the majority of those reps, at least play the entire first half, so we can, potentially get a final answer on this quarterback 2 battle. Perhaps the Titans already feel like they have an answer. Maybe they've already made the decision. Maybe they feel like it's Willis that will open the season as the backup, or maybe they think Levis has done enough and they don't need to see any more. Although I would be surprised if they held that opinion of the latter, option that I just mentioned. So yeah. I'm hoping Levis suits up. It's not only exciting for the fan base. I think he needs more reps. They need to see more of him in a live action contest, not just in practice against his own teammates. So crossing my fingers here that Will Levis plays against the Patriots on Friday.
Yeah, me too. I'd love to see him with, just a few reps behind the first team offensive line, which he did not get to do yet in the preseason. He wasn't out there for those reps in the first preseason game and obviously didn't play in the second one. So I'd like to see him get that opportunity. Another big question here about this team is the health of the wide receivers. We know Kyle Phillips is dealing with an MCL sprain, as reported by Paul Kaharski, and could miss anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks of real time, which might take him to week 3 or 4 of the regular season. Kyaris Jackson, also injured, was not participating in that blue-white scrimmage on Tuesday, so we don't know his status. Who's going to step up at wide receiver with these two guys out? Who's the go-to slot guy? Because you'd think Kyaris Jackson would be a good replacement for Kyle Phillips. Well, now next up, I guess, is Mason Kinsey. Colton Dowell did not play in last week's preseason game, but he was back on the practice field on Tuesday, so you'd like to see him get out there and make an impact. Is it finally time for Reggie Robertson to have a breakout game? Is it time for Trayshawn Harrison to do something? I think it depends on who plays quarterback, because if it's Malik Willis again and he's only completing 10 passes again, you may not get a good look at any of these wide receivers. I still think special teams is going to be crucial. Racey McMath and Mason Kinsey have been the leading receivers for the Titans through 2 preseason games. Is that going to continue? That's something I'm going to be watching, not just, and we talked about this going into the first preseason game, not just who's the most productive, but who's in there first and who doesn't play at all in the second half. I think we'll be able to tell maybe whose spots are safer based on how they use these guys in the game.
Well, you said it, right? We're waiting for one of these guys to sort of separate themselves in this very jumbled battle, right? To be either the 5th or probably 6th and final wide receiver spot. I think you're going to see a lot of Mason Kinsey in this game, and I feel like he's going to be very productive. He'll lead the team in receiving yards and receptions throughout this contest, and I expect to see more from Reggie Robertson Jr. as well. No Kyle Phillips in this game, as you said. Will we see guys who are probably going to make the roster like Nick Westbrook-Akine and Chris Moore? Maybe the Titans just decide to hold them out and start with guys like Kinsey, Robertson, Trayshawn Harrison, Colton Dowell, who had missed a few practices but returned to the field on Tuesday during the blue and white scrimmage. Will Kearis Jackson, as you said, get healthy enough to play in this game? Can Gavin Holmes make a last-ditch attempt to prove that he's the most impressive undrafted receiver by getting onto the field and being productive? So I think you're going to see a lot of opportunity for a lot of these receivers in the final game, and I hope it is a little bit different than the first and second game where really none of them separated themselves.
Yeah, and just to recap what happened last week, Trayshawn Harrison led all wide receivers with 44 snaps. Next was Reggie Robertson with 26 snaps, Gavin Holmes 23, Mason Kinsey 22. 2 of those were at quarterback, but 22 snaps total. Nick Westbrook-Akine only played 14 snaps, Chris Moore only played 13 snaps, and Racey McMath only played 8 snaps on offense. He did play 11 special team snaps, but only 8 snaps on offense. That might seem to indicate that McMath is the highest ranked out of all these guys if they didn't want to play him that much in the preseason game. And he still had a nice big catch and run play. He was targeted on Malik Willis's interception. And then Kyle Phillips played 1 snap on offense and 1 snap on special teams before he injured his knee. So if you just look at the pecking order from last week, Trayshawn Harrison might be on the bottom with 44 snaps. Racey McMath might be, the top of that group out of the 5 that we know are lock, or what we consider locks, which would be Hopkins, Burks, Phillips, Westbrook-Akine, and Chris Moore. Is Racey McMath number 6 based on snap counts? Let's see how he's used in this 3rd preseason game. If he doesn't play, he's a lock for the team. If he does play, maybe they want to see a little bit more. The next question I have here is about the defensive line, because these defensive tackles have not stepped up come preseason games. The Titans have continued to churn the back end of the roster at that position. They just added Trayvon Coley in addition to Michael Dwumfor. They've been adding guys left and right. Kyle Pico was added last week. And I'd like to see, we're not going to see Jeffrey Simmons. Probably won't see Tier Tart, despite the fact that he played last week. Danico Autry, those guys aren't going to play. So Jaleel Johnson, Naquan Jones, who's been dealing with a knee scope and is back on the field as of Tuesday morning. Can they step up? Kyle Pico, Michael Dwumfor, I just mentioned, Tyler Shelvin, Jaden Peavy, TK McClendon Jr. Are any of these guys going to step up and go claim a roster spot, or is it going to be left for the guys that we are used to, like Naquan Jones, or a returner like Kyle Pico, Trayvon Coley?
Yeah, well, I think for Naquan Jones, it's hopefully it's good timing for him to get back on the field. It was great to hear that he was at Tuesday's practice. I imagine he'll play on Friday against the Patriots. That's really his only opportunity, it feels like, this summer to prove that he should stick on the 53-man roster. He's really the only one that's returning, essentially, right, from the team last year. So he entered the summer maybe feeling like he was the in-house favorite, but knowing he was going to have to battle. And he probably is battling against guys like Kyle Pico and Michael Dwumfor for that 5th and final spot on the defensive line. I still have Jaden Peavy on my 53-man roster, so that's the way I view it. So it feels like the receiver battle a little bit, right? Like there's a lot of guys in contention, and none of them have really stepped up and seized the opportunity. So Friday represents their last opportunity, and I'm excited to monitor their progress.
Yeah, me too. Back to the health question. When we look at inside linebacker, Monty Rice played 7 snaps in the first preseason game, did not play in the last preseason game, was not practicing on Tuesday this week. I don't know if he's just not healthy or not available for some other reason, but Monty Rice, if he can't play in this third preseason game, is he a guy that they, maybe they put him on the initial 53 and then head straight to IR and bring up somebody else that they just cut? Or is Monty Rice just going to be safe and maybe he needs a little bit of time to get right? I'm very curious to see if he plays in this game on Friday. I kind of at this point don't expect him to. And if he doesn't, who's going to step up and seize either the inside linebacker 2 or inside linebacker 3 role? If you assume Azeez Al-Shaair has inside linebacker 1 locked down, is it Jack Gibbons next? He seems to be the next guy up. Or is it Chance Campbell? Or can somebody else make a play or two and cement themselves in this rotation as well, like a Ben Neiman, Otis Reese, Luke Gifford? What's going on with the inside linebackers? I think this is still a huge question for Titans fans.
Well, at this point, I don't know that I expect Monty Rice to play in this game, in all honesty, right? It doesn't feel like it's trending in that direction that he's going to be available for this one. And if he isn't, as you said, they've got a very interesting decision to make. Do they just flat out, cut ties and release him and sort of admit defeat on a former third round pick that wasn't drafted by Rand Carthon, obviously? So there's not exactly a sense of loyalty there. And number two, or do they keep him on the initial 53, as you said, and immediately place him on IR so he misses the first 4 games and bring one of those other linebackers that maybe they have to initially cut? I don't know, in all honesty, which one of those options is more likely. Like at this point, I wouldn't be totally shocked if they just sort of cut ties and say, you know what, he sort of hasn't been healthy or productive enough maybe throughout his stint here. He hasn't been consistently available. We're just gonna move on from another John Robinson pick. Or, they still feel like there's enough talent there, which, I think there is. I think when he's been on the field, he's been good, just hasn't been on the field enough. But do they say, hey, you know what? We still think he's a talented player. We're going to hold on to him, IR him for the first 4 games, and then bring him back, for week 5. So it'd be very interesting to see what decision they make there. There's no shortage of talent, right? If they just want to cut ties and move on, they could justify just saying, we're going to keep Chance Campbell, or we're going to keep Ben Neiman. We're going to keep Otis Reese that can play special teams. So quite a decision there that they have to make at this point. Whether he's healthy or not, in all honesty, I think, Jack Gibbons is going to start week 1 next to Azeez Al-Shaair.
Yeah,
I don't think
agreed.
that's really up for grabs anymore.
Yeah, and I think Chance Campbell's the first guy off the bench if they want to rotate or if they need a different, personnel package or something. It's not going to be Monty Rice, even if he is healthy, because he just hasn't been out there enough. We'll see how that shakes out. I saved this question for here because it's a huge one for me. Who's going to start at right tackle? I really want to see if Justin Murray is going to get run with the first team offensive line in this game. Assuming they even play in this game, they could just hold out the entire first team offensive line. It's the last preseason game. Maybe they want to give the backups a chance while they sort through, who the other 4 or 5 guys are going to be, depending on how many they keep. So if the first team offensive line does roll out there, is it still Chris Hubbard at right tackle, or do they give Justin Murray a shot? And then if the first team offensive line doesn't play, maybe Justin Murray still starts at right tackle with a chance to prove that he can do that in week 1. I'm curious to see how that competition shakes out.
Yeah, that's a great question because if my memory serves me correctly, in the final preseason game, Mike Vrabel usually takes a more cautious approach. One of the more cautious approaches of any coach and team in the league. Like, they have not played many important players in the third and final preseason game, if my memory serves correct. With that said, could be a bit of a different case with the first team offensive line, right? It goes one or two ways. Either they say they've been good enough, we've seen enough through 2 games and we're not going to play them, or we need to see more. They need to continue building chemistry. We've got a bunch of new starters up there. They're going to play in this game. So either way, whichever it is, whether they play or they don't play, I hope Justin Murray does start this game and is the first team right tackle against the Patriots, because even if they don't play the quote-unquote starters, if Murray plays, I do think there's still a bit of a competition there, and there's still room for Murray to earn the job and take it away from Chris Hubbard before the first game against the New Orleans Saints. So Murray was terrific against the Minnesota Vikings the other day. I actually ended up writing an article on it because I thought he was so outstanding. And I think that competition should still be up for grabs. And whether he's got, Daniel Brunskill next to him, or Andrew Rupsich, or Xavier Newman-Johnson, whoever plays right guard, if it's the second team, Jordan Roos, I really hope it's Justin Murray at right tackle when the game starts.
Me too, and I hope he plays well, because for whatever random reason, I'm rooting for him to get the job. Maybe it's because his name is Justin, just like us. We're the Justin and Justin Titans podcast show, so maybe Justin Murray can win that job to rep our names. Another huge question I have, who's going to return punts with Kyle Phillips sidelined? We don't know exactly how many weeks Kyle Phillips is going to miss, but the expectation is he will not be playing in week 1. So who's going to be taking those punt return snaps? I think it's going to be Eric Garrer, who's been playing really well on defense and also adds this special teams value. If he does a good job returning punts, doesn't muff any, makes the right decisions in regards to when to fair catch, when to actually, go for a return, I think that could be the thing that cements his roster spot on this team.
I agree. I think Eric Garrer is going to return punts on Friday. And with Kyle Phillips, probably not being healthy enough to start the regular season, and Garrer, as well as he's played defensively, I mean, he may have already solidified himself on the 53-man roster, but I think it's almost more of a sure thing now that he's probably going to be the punt returner to open the year. I thought he's looked great returning punts when he's had that opportunity. On defense, he's played some nickel. He's played a little outside despite being undersized, and he's been a really good, secure wrap-up tackler. So I'm very excited to watch him on Friday. I'm as confident as I can be when it comes to predicting an undrafted free agent to make the 53-man roster because he's been really, really good on defense and special teams.
Yeah, totally agree. Is there any other questions you're looking to have answered by this final preseason game, Justin?
Well, in relation to him, I would just mention the other undrafted DBs that have played well, right? Armani Marsh, Anthony Kendall. I don't necessarily have a question, but Tyreek Jones, you've mentioned as well. This is their final opportunity to prove that they belong on the 53-man roster. It's an uphill battle for all of these guys, but all of them have played well, so they all deserve a chance to shine one final time and maybe help Rand Carthon make up his mind. So definitely excited to see how the snaps play out at DB and how all those rookie corners play.
Yeah, same. I think it'll be interesting. I wonder if we see any of Tajay Spears in this game or if it's going to be the all Julius Chestnut, Jacquez Patrick game or how that's going to shake out. I do think that you're right. Mike Vrabel's probably not going to play very many key pieces in this one. So the guys that don't play, barring injury, you can probably safely assume that they're going to be on the roster come August 29th. So that's another thing that we'll be tracking. All right, that does it for this preview. Titans take on the Patriots at home, 7:15 p.m. Central Time. It's on NFL Network. Unless you're in the local Nashville area, then you'll have to check your local stations to see that game because it'll probably be blacked out on NFL Network if you're in the area. That does it for this preview. We'll be back next week to recap the game and to talk about the final 53-man roster, which is coming next Tuesday, August 29th. So until then, y'all stay safe out there and tighten up.